Hello, and don't worry, today is going to be a great day. Hello, today we are getting back into our book club videos for the new year. We will be discussing The Savior's Sister by Jenna Moreci, which is the second book in the Savior series. And it's very fitting that we're doing The Savior's Sister because our first ever book club was The Savior's Champion, which is the first book in the series. Next month we'll be reading Soon I'll Be Invincible by Austin Grossman. I'll be leaving a link to where you can buy both of these books in the description, as well as the link to Jenna's YouTube channel. As always, this video will contain spoilers. So this was actually not my first time reading The Savior's Sister. I actually read it last year, shortly after it came out. However, both times I've read it, I read it within a week. This book, at least in my experience, was utterly entrancing. Despite knowing exactly what came next, I still found myself lost in time, wanting to read all day. And I would read all day. The entire book just went by so fast. I did find that some scenes went by a whole lot slower than others. These were mostly the lengthy romance scenes. However, I think at least part of that was because all those scenes were overlap from the original book, the first book, The Savior's Champion, which is told by the love interest point of view. So we've already seen those scenes once, and now we're seeing it again. And since this is a dark fantasy romance, the two characters spend a lot of time together over the course of the books, which have to be written in almost the same manner. You can't have them say one thing in one book and something completely different in another book when it's happening at the same exact time. However, I do think a lot of these repeated scenes were altered just enough to keep them entertaining and not flat out boring. This was actually mostly done through the use of color, which I thought was really interesting because Tobias is the artist, but when you're looking at these scenes through Layla's point of view, she focuses and mentions a lot more color in them. Layla is the savior of Thesson and hence has magical powers. And one of those powers is being able to see people's mood extending out of them in the form of like a colored mist. This actually adds a whole lot of dimension to a lot of scenes throughout the entire book. But specifically in the love scene, like you see, she makes little patterns in the color emanating from Tobias, which really alters the scene just enough to keep you interested in how she's seeing this part of the conversation or this part of the book. I also think this kind of redirects the focus of the scenes from the words written in their banter to more of the emotion shared within them, because now you get to see how Layla feels about it, so you're not just guessing based off of Tobias's perspective, while also getting to see what Tobias feels in a way because she can see his emotions. The other thing I think she does really well to keep these scenes entertaining is the use of secrets. When reading the first book, Tobias really doesn't keep any secrets from Layla. He just tells her pretty much everything. On the other hand, he knows that she's keeping secrets from him. And while he says he's okay with it, as a reader, I wanted to know what she was thinking and what she was keeping as secrets. So even though the secrets are kind of centered around these shared scenes and not necessarily in them, it's really interesting to read to understand her thought process of, oh, maybe I should share this, oh, maybe I shouldn't. You know, like justification as to why she didn't want to tell him certain pieces of information. Even if as a reader you disagree with her, it's really interesting to kind of get in our head like that and get that sort of type of thing, which, you know, drastically affects what happens later in the book for him. So as I mentioned, these two books take place, give or take, over the same amount of time. The Savior's Sister actually takes place like a day early and ends just a few minutes later than The Savior's Champion. I think this is necessary in order to establish more of a baseline Layla and understand what she was like before all the events of the book start happening, because as soon as the events of the book start happening, she's like being hunted actively and has to kind of change how she would normally behave. So it's nice to have that extra day in before the actual tournament starts, because then there's this sudden urgency and pressure that she needs to get information right away because her would-be assassins are literally on the grounds. She's in danger from that moment on, and there's more of a rush involved. Whereas before, we could kind of get a better idea of what she was like before she had to rush through everything. And I think that does a really good job of establishing her as a character in general, so you can see more of her transformation overall throughout the series and throughout the book. Whereas Tobias, since his journey doesn't really start, and he doesn't really start to change until after he enters the tournament, he can spend all of Savior's Day just being himself, and hence establishing a baseline of who he is. Even though I've been through this book twice and Tobias's book 3 times at least, I still cried. Actually, on my second day of reading, I read like all day, so not only did I have to deal with Xander's death and Enzo's reaction to it, but I also had to deal with Orion's death and Tobias's reaction to it. And those are 2 of the most heartbreaking moments for me in the series. One of the other heartbreaking moments for me is when Ghost Orion shows up in the mirror with his little baby and he's showing it off to Layla. Oh my god, it kills me. It kills me. Every time. Every time. So a lot of the good characters you meet in the first book, but I really liked a lot of the characters in the second book that you meet as well. You get to learn a lot more about Pippa and see her a lot more. And I really like that because Pippa's just such a sweetheart. I also adore Hylas. He's just so adorable, and I love how he's like, well, it's either I kill the Savior, be killed, or die. So I guess I'm gonna die. And Lena's like, or you could help me. And he's like, yeah, I could help you! One thing I thought was very surprising was like the complete different side of Raphael that we saw in this book. In the Savior series, he's kind of like, you know, just there, kind of passive. He's a little annoyed with everyone, but you know, he's just there. In the Savior's sister, he actually blackmails Layla by threatening to tell everyone who she is, which I actually think kind of blinds him to things that he should have figured out. I mean, he's the intellect, and it took him until like right before leaving that he really put anything together. I expected a little bit more from the intellect, and I kind of feel like he wasn't self-centered, but sort of in a state of survival, which I personally think probably led to him overlooking certain things that he shouldn't have, just because, you know, he's literally called the intellect. He's supposed to be the smart one. And Layla was kind of not making the best decisions half the time. So the smart one should have kind of picked up on it, especially once they were in the castle. That should have kind of been a big red flag type of thing, because, you know, there's a lot more people around to kind of give stuff away right over his head. Yeah, but overall, I really like the book. I really like the series. I can't wait for the next book. If you want to get more information on any of these books, if you want to get an update on the next one coming out, remember I'm going to link Jenna's channel, YouTube channel, in the description below, but I think I'm going to go ahead and leave it here. What did you think of the Savior's sister? Which of the 2 perspectives did you enjoy more? What's something you hope happens in the Savior's army? That's going to be it. For now, a smiley farewell, and always remember, nothing is ever only one thing.